You've been told your whole life to be nice, to turn the other cheek, to keep the peace. But when it comes to narcissists, that rule will destroy you. Niceness isn't kindness, it's compliance. And every time you excuse, enable, or over-accommodate, you're feeding the very darkness that's trying to take you down. Today, I'm going to show you why being nice to a narcissist is the exact thing that keeps you stuck, and what you must do instead to finally walk in the freedom God has for you. You know, for so long many of us were taught that being nice is the highest virtue we could carry. Smile even when it hurts. Keep quiet even when something feels wrong. Smooth things over when conflict arises. It feels noble, it feels safe, and for some of us, it even feels spiritual. But let me tell you the truth, niceness is not the same thing as kindness. Niceness is often rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. It bends to keep everyone else comfortable while silently suffocating the one who practices it. Kindness, on the other hand, is rooted in truth. It seeks what is right, not just what is easy. It loves enough to be honest, even when honesty stings. This is exactly where narcissists find their perfect playground, because they don't want your kindness, they want your compliance. They thrive when you stay quiet, when you back down, when you water yourself down so they can take center stage. And if you've been operating out of niceness, you've probably noticed it never changes them. It never softens them. It never draws them to respect you. In fact, the more nice you are, the more demanding they become, because in their eyes, niceness equals weakness. Now, maybe you've justified it by saying, well, I'm just trying to be Christ, like. But let's think about this. Jesus was kind, absolutely, but he was not a pushover. He loved with a bold truth that exposed hypocrisy. He drew boundaries with people who came only to trap him. He even called out evil for what it was. That's kindness, speaking and standing for truth. Niceness, in contrast, would have stayed silent. Niceness would have let manipulation slide for the sake of keeping things calm. But you and I both know that calm doesn't last when a narcissist is around. Here's what happens when you live in niceness. You end up constantly betraying yourself. You sacrifice your voice, your needs, your discernment, all to keep someone else comfortable. And what does that really do? It trains the narcissist to believe they can do whatever they want, and you'll just bend a little more to make room for them. Before you know it, you've lost yourself in their world, all because you confused niceness with godly love. But let me ask you, has your niceness ever changed a narcissist? Has it ever caused them to suddenly stop exploiting you and say, wow, I see your heart, I'll never hurt you again? No, because that's not how narcissists work. They interpret niceness as permission, and the longer you play that role, the longer they remain in control. You were not created to be a puppet. You were created to walk in truth, to reflect the image of a God who is merciful but also just, who is loving but also firm, who is kind but never spineless. And when you begin to shift from niceness to kindness, everything changes. Kindness says, I care about you, but I won't lie for you. Kindness says, I love you, but I won't allow you to trample me. Kindness says, I will forgive you, but I will also hold you accountable. That's strength. That's freedom. So the next time you're tempted to just be nice, to avoid rocking the boat with that narcissist in your life, remember this: niceness won't save you, and it won't save them. Truth will, boundaries will, real godly kindness will. Because niceness may keep the peace for a moment, but kindness is what protects your soul for a lifetime. When you deal with a narcissist, you'll notice something very quickly. They are always watching how you respond. They test your limits, they push your buttons, and they wait to see if you'll go along. And here's the thing. Every single time you give in, even in the smallest way, you're teaching them how much they can get away with. Narcissists feed on compliance. It's not your love they crave. It's not even your agreement. It's your surrender. They thrive off the fact that you'll lower your standards just to keep them happy. Think about it. How many times have you said yes when everything in you wanted to say no? How many times have you apologized when you weren't even the one who did something wrong? How many times have you silenced yourself just to avoid their wrath or their silent treatment? That's compliance, and while you may have thought you were keeping the peace, what you were really doing was handing them the blueprint of how to control you. Narcissists don't respect compliance. They don't look at your sacrifice and say, "Wow, what a wonderful, loving person." No. They see it as confirmation that their tactics are working. If they throw a tantrum and you give in, they'll throw another one. If they guilt trip you and you fold, they'll sharpen that tool for next time. If they criticize you and you shrink, they'll come back harder because they know it works. It's a cycle that doesn't break until you stop feeding it. And let's be honest, sometimes compliance feels easier in the moment. It feels safer to just go along, to not make waves, to avoid their rage. But safety built on compliance is a false safety. It's a temporary escape that always comes with a bigger cost. Because the more you give in, the more control you lose. And the more control you lose, the harder it becomes to find yourself again. I know what some of you might be thinking, but isn't it better to choose peace than conflict? Let me tell you something. Peace at the expense of truth is not real peace. It's bondage. It's slavery to someone else's dysfunction. You were never called to bow down to manipulation just to avoid conflict. True peace comes when you know who you are and you stand firm in it, even if it causes temporary discomfort. Narcissists will always take advantage of the person who values comfort over confrontation. They'll drain your energy, steal your confidence, and rob you of your voice, all because you thought being agreeable would eventually win them over. But they're not looking to be won over. They're looking to dominate, and your compliance fuels that fire. The truth is, narcissists don't just feed off your compliance. They starve without it. The moment you stop giving in, the game begins to collapse. They may try harder at first. They may rage. They may manipulate. But eventually, when compliance is no longer on the table, their grip weakens. They can't thrive in an environment where boundaries are firm and where truth is louder than their lies. So the most loving, most godly thing you can do is stop handing them your compliance. Stop teaching them that your silence and submission are up for sale. Because every time you refuse to play the game, every time you stand in truth, you're not only protecting yourself, you're stripping away the very thing that feeds their power. And when you stop feeding the beast begins to die. When you're dealing with a narcissist, you quickly realize that words don't mean much to them. You can tell them how hurt you are. You can explain how their behavior affects you. You can even beg them to change. And they'll nod, they'll dismiss, or they'll twist it back on you. That's because a narcissist doesn't respond to talk. They respond to limits. Boundaries are what draw the line between what they can and cannot do in your life, and without them, you become a revolving door to their manipulation. Boundaries aren't about punishing anyone, and they're not about trying to control someone else's behavior. They're about protecting your heart, your peace, your God-given identity. They are the invisible fences that say, "This is where I end and you begin." And with narcissists, those fences are essential because without them, they will take every inch you give and demand a mile more. Let me paint it this way. Imagine leaving your house unlocked, no doors, no barriers. Would you be shocked if an intruder walked right in? Probably not. You'd expect it. That's what it's like living without boundaries around a narcissist. You leave everything open, hoping they'll respect your space, but they won't. They'll take advantage of every unlocked door and then blame you for letting it happen. Boundaries are those locks, those barriers that say, you may not come any further than this. Now, the problem is, many people confuse setting boundaries with being unkind or selfish. But boundaries are actually the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and the other person. Because the truth is, when you allow someone to continue harmful behavior unchecked, you're enabling them. You're silently agreeing to their dysfunction, but when you set a boundary, you're holding up a mirror that says, this is what I will and will not allow. And sometimes that's the very wake-up call someone needs, even if they don't like it. With narcissists, though, expect pushback. The moment you draw a line, they'll try to cross it. They'll test your resolve. They'll throw guilt, shame, anger, anything to get you to move the line back. This is where most people falter because the resistance feels overwhelming. But here's the truth. Boundaries only work if you enforce them. If you say, don't speak to me that way, but then allow them to do it again without consequence, they'll learn that your words are empty. But when your actions back up your words, that's when respect begins to form, even if they'll never admit it. And listen, boundaries are not about changing the narcissist. That's not your job. Boundaries are about changing you, changing how you respond, changing what you tolerate, changing how you show up in the relationship. They put you back in alignment with the truth of who you are, not the twisted version the narcissist wants you to believe. It won't always feel easy. It won't always feel comfortable. Sometimes it'll feel like you're standing in the middle of a storm, holding a line that no one else understands. But remember, boundaries are not a weapon, they are a shield, and every time you uphold one, you strengthen that shield. You build trust in yourself, you reclaim pieces of your identity, and you take back the authority that God has given you over your own life. Because in the end, narcissists don't respect words, they respect boundaries. And the moment you stop just talking about what hurts you and start enforcing what protects you, you shift the balance of power. That's when you stop being their victim and start being free. When you've been caught in the web of a narcissist, it's easy to start believing that being endlessly nice, endlessly forgiving, and endlessly accommodating is somehow the right thing to do. Maybe you've told yourself that this is what love looks like. Maybe you've convinced yourself that God wants you to be patient to the point of losing yourself. But here's the truth. When you confuse niceness with godly kindness, you end up spiritually bound. You become trapped in cycles of abuse, not because you don't love God, but because you're misapplying His word to a situation where it doesn't belong. See, God never called you to be a doormat. He never asked you to let someone walk all over your heart, your dignity, and your purpose. He called you to love, yes, but love is not blind tolerance. Love is not silence in the face of wrongdoing. Love, in its purest form, is aligned with truth, and sometimes truth means calling out what's wrong. Sometimes truth means stepping back. Sometimes truth means saying no. Narcissists thrive when you misuse niceness. They twist your willingness to turn the other cheek into a license to harm you again and again. They turn your compassion into chains that keep you tied to their dysfunction. And before long, you find yourself not just emotionally drained, but spiritually weighed down, because deep inside, you know something isn't right. You feel the conflict in your soul between what you're tolerating and what you know God actually desires for your life, and that's where the bondage comes in. Because the longer you stay silent, the longer you keep excusing, the longer you let niceness dictate your choices, the more you disconnect from your own spiritual authority. Instead of walking in the confidence of who God created you to be, you're walking in fear. Fear of rocking the boat, fear of losing the relationship, fear of being seen as unkind. But fear is not from God, and anything that keeps you living in fear is not holy. It's a trap. Think about it this way. Jesus was full of compassion, but he wasn't afraid to speak truth to power. He healed the hurting, but he also overturned the tables of those who were corrupt. He laid down his life willingly, but he never allowed others to dictate his mission or silence his voice. That's the balance of love and truth. That's kindness with strength. And that's what you're called to walk into when you allow yourself to stay stuck in niceness. You're actually holding the very thing that could set both you and the narcissist free. Accountability. Because without boundaries, without truth, there's no opportunity for repentance, and there's no opportunity for growth. Niceness isn't protecting them, it's just prolonging their dysfunction. And it isn't protecting you, it's binding you. So the question becomes, are you willing to step out of that false sense of spirituality, that belief that being nice at all costs is somehow holy, and step into the real freedom that God has for you? Are you willing to break the cycle, even if it means disappointing people who have benefited from your silence? Because the reality is, you can't walk fully in God's purpose for your life while you're chained by someone else's manipulation, and that's why this shift is so critical. Because the moment you stop using niceness as a mask, the moment you align your love with truth, is the moment the chains fall. That's when you finally stop living bound to their control and start living free in God's design for your life. Because you were never created to be bound, you were created to be free. One of the most dangerous traps you can fall into with a narcissist is thinking that if you just keep being nice, if you just keep covering for them, if you just keep the peace a little longer, somehow things will get better. You convince yourself that you're showing grace, that you're being merciful, that you're doing the godly thing by not exposing them or not holding them accountable. But what's really happening is that your niceness is interfering with something far bigger God's justice see. When you step in to soften the blow of a narcissist's behavior, you're shielding them from the very consequences that could bring them face with their own choices. You're trying to do God's job for him. And the hard truth is, when you keep rescuing someone from the fallout of their actions, you delay the very justice that could either wake them up or stop them in their tracks. Think about it. How many times have you made excuses for their behavior? They're just stressed. They didn't really mean it. They had a hard childhood. And while those things might explain some of their patterns, they do not excuse them. Every time you cover for them, you create a cushion that keeps them from feeling the weight of their actions. And without that weight, why would they ever change? Why would they ever see the need to God as a way of dealing with people? He is merciful, yes, but he is also just, and his justice doesn't always look like immediate lightning bolts from heaven. It often looks like allowing someone to reap what they've sown. But when you step in with your niceness to block that process, you're standing in the way of what God is trying to do. You're taking on a role that doesn't belong to you. And in the process, you're prolonging your own pain. I know it's not easy. You don't want to see anyone suffer, even someone who has hurt you deeply. Your heart longs for peace, but you cannot confuse peacekeeping with peacemaking. A peacekeeper avoids conflict at all costs, even if it means enabling evil. A peacemaker speaks truth, holds firm boundaries, and lets God's justice unfold, even when it's uncomfortable. And here's the thing, narcissists count on your niceness. They count on you to smooth things over when they've crossed a line. They count on you to make excuses to family, to hide the truth from friends, to tolerate the intolerable just to keep the appearance of harmony. They feed off of it, and the cycle keeps spinning. But when you stop covering for them, when you stop playing the role of protector, the facade begins to crumble. And that's when God's justice has room to step in. Justice doesn't always mean their downfall, though sometimes it does. Sometimes it means exposure. Sometimes it means the loss of a relationship they thought they could control forever. Sometimes it means a mirror held up to their own behavior so they can no longer deny it. And sometimes, if their heart is willing, it even means the chance for repentance. But whatever it looks like, it's not yours to control. Your role is to step out of the way and let God be God. And here's the beautiful part. When you release the need to protect the narcissist from their own consequences, you're also releasing yourself. You no longer carry the weight of fixing them, changing them, or saving them. You step back into the freedom that comes from knowing God sees, God knows, and God will handle it in His perfect timing. Because when you stop shielding a narcissist with your niceness, you stop delaying God's justice, and you start walking in His peace. There's a lie many of us have bought into, and it's the idea that being strong means being cold, harsh, or unloving. So when we hear someone say, "Stop being nice to the narcissist," it almost sounds like we're being told to become mean, bitter, or cruel. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Real strength isn't about hardness, it's about firmness. It's about being rooted so deeply in truth and in who God created you to be that no amount of manipulation, no amount of guilt, and no amount of charm can sway you. See, narcissists don't understand niceness, but they do understand strength. And the kind of strength I'm talking about doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to rage, doesn't need to get even. It simply stands firm. It's the quiet but unwavering voice that says, "No, I will not accept that behavior." It's the steady presence that refuses to compromise values for the sake of temporary peace. It's the confidence that doesn't seek validation from the very person trying to strip it away. That's what true strength looks like, and it's far more powerful than any kind of surface-level niceness ever could be. When you walk in that strength, you're not abandoning love, you're embodying it. Because love without truth is just enabling, and truth without love can be harsh. But when you blend truth with love, you become both strong and kind, compassionate yet immovable. Narcissists cannot function in that environment. They thrive in the presence of fear and insecurity, but they shrink in the presence of strength. Think for a moment about how much energy you've wasted trying to be nice to someone who never truly saw your heart. You gave and gave, thinking your niceness would soften them, but it only left you drained. Now imagine what happens when you decide that instead of pouring out niceness, you're going to step into strength. That energy you once wasted trying to appease them now fuels your boundaries. The voice you once silenced now speaks with confidence. The self you once betrayed now finds protection in your own firmness. That is when everything shifts, of course. Narcissists will test that strength. They will push harder. They will try every trick in the book to knock you off balance. They may even accuse you of being selfish or cruel. But remember, that's only because your strength is exposing their weakness. They can no longer manipulate the way they once did. They can no longer rely on your compliance to keep the cycle spinning. And while their resistance may feel uncomfortable at first, it's also the clearest sign that your strength is working. Here's the truth. Being strong doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you stop loving. It doesn't mean you close your heart off to the world. It means you stop pouring your care, your love, and your heart into someone who is only using it against you. It means you reserve your deepest compassion for those who can value and respect it. And you stop throwing it into a bottomless pit. Strength is what frees you. Strength is what teaches others how to treat you. Strength is what honors the God who created you, not as a person to be trampled on, but as a person of value and dignity. And the moment you choose strength over niceness, you step into a power that no narcissist can take from you, because true strength is not about being nice, it's about being free. At the end of the day, it comes down to this. You were never meant to shrink yourself to keep someone else satisfied. Being nice to a narcissist won't save them, and it certainly won't save you. What will? Walking in truth, standing in strength, setting boundaries, refusing to cover what God is trying to expose, choosing kindness rooted in courage rather than niceness rooted in fear. That's how you break free from their grip. That's how you step into the life God designed for you. And that's how you reclaim your peace. Because the moment you stop being nice to a narcissist is the moment you finally start being true to yourself.